All right, welcome back. Well, later on today, the Congressional Budget Office will preview their revised outlook for 2020 to 2030. And while Congress is at a standstill over another potential stimulus package, some economists are saying that right now, deficits, they may simply not matter. Joining us is Douglas Holtz-Eakin. He is American Action Forum president, former CBO director, and Maya McGinnis, president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And Maya, we'll start with you because this year something historic is going to happen, something kind of terrible, I guess, if you are worried about debts, and that is the federal budget deficit will exceed the size of the entire American economy. Debt to GDP will trump that of what it was in World War II. Will it matter, however? Because other countries, many of them, are just as or close to in debt based on their GDP. Do deficits and debts matter now and for the next couple of years?
Yeah, there's no question that deficits and debt do matter. In many ways, they matter for this very moment, right? You need to have a strong fiscal situation so that you can borrow during emergencies, and we are certainly in one. And there are a lot of countries that are worse off than us, and in some ways that helps because it means that we still have a lot of demand for our own debt, but it also means the whole global economy is awash with debt. And the real risk here is not what happens in this moment. There still seems to be plenty of room for borrowing, but the vulnerabilities it increases into our country and our economy coming up, because debt is sort of this invisible risk in your economy. We will be less prepared for all emergencies. We will be more vulnerable to big shifts in our interest rates or inflation or our currency. And you want to have a healthy balance sheet. The big mistake for us was we kept borrowing during the boom time. So we entered this in an already sort of untenable, unsustainable position. And this massive run-up in debt that the CBO is going to talk about today is going to demonstrate that that debt trajectory is now much worse.
It's not just that, Doug. I mean, the pandemic and lockdowns are going to change a lot of things. They've changed a lot of lives already in many, many ways. And this is going to change the way Congress thinks about spending, I would imagine. I mean, we used to dither. You know, I'm old enough to remember screaming about the $938 billion stimulus plan under President Obama. That seems quaint these days. $1 trillion to pay off student debt, people screamed. Now we're spending $2 and $3 trillion in multiple pops. How is this going to change the way future generations of Congress think about spending? Maybe it's just unlimited spending and debt never matters.
Yeah, you and I have both gotten old. I can remember being the CBO director and people yell at me about a $400 billion deficit. We're 10 times that now, and no one even blinks. It's quite amazing. I think there will be a reckoning. You know, not this year, not next year, but years from now, we're going to come to the realization that we're spending a lot of money on debt service because of incurred debts. Any country has as a minimum the requirement that it is capable of stabilizing its debt relative to its GDP. And the U.S. has not done that in the 21st century. And so future lawmakers, at a minimum, are going to have to somehow get us to some stability. They're going to find out when they get there that they don't have any discretion to go after new programs for the voters of the future who want something that wasn't baked in the cake in the 20th century. And that's going to be a tough political moment for them because it will be the reality that the debt does matter.
Well, Maya, you know, you look at the bill, it's going to be paid. And by the way, the congressional leaders on both sides, they're the ones that are footing the bills, but they're not going to have to write the checks. I mean, they're going to be gone out of Congress, and it's us and our kids' kids are going to have to pay for it. It's kind of easy to do that, right? But the only way out of this is going to have to be higher taxes. I'm not advocating for higher taxes, but let's be clear. Joe Biden's plan is for higher taxes on those making over $400,000 a year. That's about 2.2% of the income tax filing base. There's simply not enough people there. Middle-class taxes, and I hate saying this, are actually at almost all-time record lows on a federal basis. That's effective after deductions. Do you see any other way out of this, Maya, besides higher taxes on everybody, maybe a value-added national sales tax? How do we pay for this?
Yeah, there's no question that sort of the political promises of what people will do and, importantly, what they won't do just aren't true at this point. The fiscal hole that we face is huge. There's an aging of the population, and there are going to be incredibly new and expensive threats coming our way. So the government is going to have to get its fiscal situation in order, and that is going to take all the policies that none of us like, which is higher taxes, maybe a new form of tax, like you said, getting rid of a lot of the existing tax breaks, and lower spending. We still have to address our huge entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare. We have to figure out how to cap spending. But I think the biggest problem that you kind of address there is politicians don't want to do this. They want to make a lot of promises. They don't want to lead on any of these issues. They'd rather focus on good politics, which is giving away free things and coming up with kind of free lunch economics. They'd rather focus on extreme things than compromising. And the polarization that we see right now is really one of the biggest threats that there is to getting the fiscal situation under control so we can have a healthy economy. And yes, the truth is we're going to have to confront a lot of the policy choices that people don't want to do, but we've been delaying them for years. And the smaller changes we make once the economy's stronger, the stronger the economy will be overall for the long run. So it's really important we do that.
Doug, does the U.S. have a unique ability to handle big debts, big deficits, compared to other countries around the world, other developed countries around the world? Certainly it does over other emerging markets around the world. And how important is it that the dollar maintains its status as reserve currency globally? And is the current fall that we've seen and question marks around that status a big risk?
Yes, I think that's a really important point. It's a great observation. Everything's relative in economics, and the U.S. is relatively able to incur large debts because when things get bad, the money flows to the U.S., it flows into the reserve currency, it is the safe haven. And so even though our fiscal situation is a mess, we are the best-looking horse in the global glue factory, and we benefit from that. It gives us additional fiscal rope, which we have done nothing but really take advantage of. So I think it's a real risk for the U.S. to not pay attention to its position as reserve currency, to sort of be very, very callous in its use of that additional flexibility. It's time to get serious about the fiscal outlook. You don't need draconian austerity. You just need to have some sensible plans on both sides of the budget. Broaden the tax base so that you're raising more revenue without slowing the economy down, and get serious about the spending programs. In this moment, for example, it is important to do the things necessary to support the economy. There's no question about that, and every dollar spent to do that will be well spent and benefit us in the future. But it doesn't mean you spend money willy-nilly, and if you spend money that you don't need to right now, we're going to pay a consequence for that in the future, and it's going to come in the form of risks on interest rate and currency and international capital flows, and I think those are things that people need to take seriously.
Maya, just to sum this up, does all of this just mean that inflation is much more likely, or put another way, would in fact be more welcome than it has been at any point? I guess we could have said that after 2008, 2009 as well, and it never really materialized.
Well, it depends what levels of inflation we're talking about, but excessive inflation obviously will come with huge risks and a lot of pain as well, but I don't think we confront that right now. I think the bottom line of this is three things. We have to focus first on the healthcare situation, the pandemic, second on getting the economy strong again, and third, not forget the piece, which is then we have to turn our attention to the fiscal situation, because the best way to stabilize all those economic factors in terms of promoting growth and keeping interest rates and inflation under control and helping our currency is to have a sound balance sheet. And that's something for political reasons and fear of hard choices we haven't done in a long time. We have to be committed to that third step once the economy is strong enough to accommodate it down the road and we've started the recovery. So that will take a lot of political will.
Yeah, and they've also doomed savers. I mean, if you had $1 million in a 5-year or 5% 10-year treasury, made $50,000 a year in investment income, now you're making $6,800 a year, so you pretty much have to buy stocks. Doug and Maya, it was a pleasure to have you on. A big debate. I have a feeling this debate is not over. Just a hunch. See you soon.